Hey guys, how's it going? Well, today we're getting ready to do a couple jobs on this 2006 Ford Fusion S. This is a 4-cylinder version. It's got a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder Mazda engine in it. And what's going on is it's going to need to have the thermostat assembly replaced, and it also is going to need a belt and a belt tensioner replaced. Now, I'll explain to you what's going on to necessitate both of those corrective actions, but the first one with the thermostat is that it obviously is not closing because it takes a long time to warm up. When you're going down the road, the gauge, instead of staying just roughly slightly left of center, it's down way down close to the coal mark, and then when you go down a mountain, this car at least, it goes way down, and the heater ranges from warm to pretty warm to kind of hot, and then back to cool and all that stuff. So that's a common thing on these, and it's just a whole assembly that comes off. The thermostat itself is not normally replaced. You have to replace the housing as well, I believe. Either way, you got to do that. And also the belt tensioner, we're going to replace that because it is squeaking when it's cold. You start the car up and let it warm up just a little bit, and you can hear shriek, 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 shriek coming from down in there. So that's also a known issue on these. These newer Mazdas don't seem to have the quality the older ones do, but that's beside the point. So there's a few videos out about doing this, and I've watched those videos, and I'm glad for those folks' contributions, but there's a few things that they left out. One of them doesn't show you anything about draining the coolant out, which I'm going to drain the coolant in this car so I don't have a big mess, hopefully, all over the driveway. And the second one is not using a tripod. It's got a bunch of music on top of it that I've seen, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to try to show you everything in detail, and I may take time to explain it, so please have patience. If you don't have patience, you don't need to be doing this job. So that's the bottom line. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drain out the coolant, and so I've got my special coolant only drain pan I use down here, and I'm going to start that now, let it drain while I'm working on some other things up here. So I will see you folks back in just a second. Okay, we got our drain pan in position here. We're under the front of the car. This will give you a reference where we're at. We're under the left front. And so what we're going to do now is, if you look under here, you'll see the red plug right there. That's the drain plug on the radiator. And you're going to need to loosen that. It has a little drain nipple, I guess you could say. So let me just go ahead and see if I can do this. Maybe one-handed. You want to be sure you turn it the right way here. Remember, this is plastic. You don't have to force it. Sorry about that. This is not a... You may want to jack the car up to get a little bit more. There you go. This car's supposed to have coolant in it. Not sure if it does. It looks like it. So anyway, there you go. Get that started, and then you can attend to some other tasks here, which we got to do on the other side. So, of the car. See you there. Go ahead and help the drain process. Just go ahead and take this cap loose on the reservoir and let that drain. So what we're going to need to do now is we'll need to get the car jacked up and get this wheel off, because we have to access the tensioner, the belt tensioner, which is in there, and it's behind the splash shield. So let me get on with that, and I'll bring you up to speed. Okay, we're now over on the right side of the car, and I have it on a jack, and I also have, for safety, a jack stand under it. And what we need to do now is our tensioner, belt tensioner for the serpentine belt is right in there. You can barely see that, but we need to get better access to it. So we're gonna take off these push pins that retain this piece of plastic here. You got, as I was pointing at, you have one back there at the bottom, one right here, one right here, one right here, and there's also one under this spot back here, but you don't need to worry about that. We can kind of get it folded out of the way. And the way these things work is sometimes they're a pain to deal with, but you just simply have to go in here with a flat blade or two. Usually two work better than one if this will focus. This camera's getting old, but you just go in under the edge of this where there's a little area to do so, and then you just start prying this center part out, and when you get it out, you can pull it out and the whole thing comes out. And just do that for all four of those, and we'll attack this serpentine belt tensioner. And also, incidentally, I see I've got another bad axle boot under here. Very nice. Here's a look at what we're trying to accomplish with these. Pry the center out, make the whole thing out. It just pops out. I've had good luck with these and bad luck with them, so good luck. Okay then, this is sort of a little crooked view of this operation, but what's going on is we're ready to release the belt tension on this serpentine belt. This is your accessory belt that drives all the, like the alternator, power steering, etc, etc, etc. One belt. So what you have to do is you look in here, look straight in from the where you're sitting at the wheel out here. There's a bolt. Looks like a bolt head, but it's actually made onto this housing here. And all it is, it's a 15mm hex head, I guess you could say, and I'm using a 15mm socket and a ratchet. And what you're going to do is you're going to just simply place your device that you're going to use to move it with. You can use a wrench if you want to, but I think this is easier. And you're going to pull down on it so that it turns, your device is turning counterclockwise, and then that should allow you to remove the belt. So I'm going to try to do this without knocking all of you off or causing some other problem here. Let's see if I can do it one-handed. Almost. Let me give it another shot here, get a little bit more. Oh, there we go. Okay, belt is off. Now, this thing has now got my ratchet caught. You dirty old piece of... Well, we'll deal with that later. Because actually, see, we're going to be coming in to do a tensioner on this too. And I can just hear those bearings in there just by rolling this thing, and it's dry. So okay, so now we're going to go up top and we're going to do some things up there. We're done down here. And now if you're only doing a thermostat, you don't have to do anything further. You can actually leave this like this if you want to. Get it back out of the way, even though it's caught right there. But you can just leave that. You're ready to put the belt back on. Because, like I said, we have to take the belt off because the power steering pump has to come out too. Be laid over to the side. You don't actually just remove it off the car. But in order to do that, we have to be able to have the belt out of the way. Okay, in this step, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to just go ahead and get this belt out of the way. Now, if you're going to reuse your belt and you're not doing anything but just taking this pump out of the way, then you can just let this belt stay in here and just kind of lay it out of the way. We're just going to let it drop, kind of drop down out of the way, and we'll probably remove it from the bottom down there in a step coming up. So what we have to do now is we have to take off the power steering pump. And there's 3 bolts. There's 2 at the top, one here, and there's also one that sort of hides, kind of an awkward arrangement to get to it. It's kind of hiding. If you put your hand under the pulley and just put your fingers just behind the pulley, you can feel the bolt down there, and that's the ones you loosen up. And those are, let me pause you by for a second, and I'll see what size wrench fits those. Be right back. Okay, in this step I did a few things to hopefully make life a little bit easier for myself. I took and got this bottle out of the way. This is the overflow bottle, the surge tank or whatever you want to call it for the coolant system. And you've got a bolt goes down through the top, got one back here, and it's got like a little sort of I don't know what you would want to call this, just a little locating tab that goes in sort of into the inner fender, and then you can work it out. And I also took the return line up here off to let it move more freely, and it's no big deal anyway because I think this thing's been off anyway because the clamp wasn't even up there to it. So, and also down in here, I'll take you guys off the stand here briefly, show you what I'm talking about. Did a couple other things down in here. I took off, if you look right down in there, there's a clamp that clamps right there, clamps to the car and holds that main coolant line in place. I took that off because I need more room to be able to get under here and maneuver my tools to that last bolt. And last thing I did was I took off this neck for this thing from here and put the bolt back in it. That goes right there normally. So we'll do that, and it should give you some more room because that's pretty tight to get that last power steering bolt out. So I'm going to work on that now, and I'll be back in just a jiff. And there ain't nothing easy about this job. So we finally got this thing cleared out and got the pump over. Now one of these bolts up here, this one on the, can't hardly see it, can you? Right there, it won't come all the way out, so don't worry about it. Okay, well, fought and got those two hoses off there finally. This is a good time to tell you a previous owner story. Would you guys like to hear a previous owner story? Well, it's a quick one. When I got this car, there was a new thermostat assembly in the back in the trunk, and that's that thing right there that the hose is attached to. It's all one assembly. 3 bolts on that. You see 2 of them. One's in another spot under there, but it's there. So anyway, I saw that in the back, and it was new. And he says, "Oh, well, we thought it needed a thermostat, but all it was a gasket." So isn't that good news when the seller of a car tells you, "Oh, it's just a gasket, you need a thermostat"? Well, here's the thing. Let me debunk that. Look at that, and you tell me, does that look like that's been off in 100,000 miles? I don't think so. All this war that I had to do to get that thing off there, and I ain't got it off yet? Hell no. That's a lie. Not true at all. And number 2, those have an O-ring around the perimeter of them, which that's a very excellent way of sealing those, and they hardly ever leak. You don't put sealer on them. You don't do anything. It's about as dumbed down as you can probably get on something like this. You put the bolts on, torque them down, put the hoses on, that's it. You're done. So that was a lie, but it was a good entertaining previous owner story of why that we did not need a thermostat. What it is, let me explain that briefly. You did need a thermostat. You just didn't feel like putting it on after this car had other problems, so that's why it was in the trunk. But you didn't say that, did you? Okay, guys, those look like they may be 10s. Let's take a look and see real quick. Here comes the scrap guy. Get on it. Get on it. Nope. I hear that all the time here. Oh no, that's somebody across the street over there in a blazer or something. Where's he at? See if he blows the horn this time. It's not. Usually he's got a Dixie horn, he blows that. Alright guys, let me fight that thermostat housing off. See you in a little bit. Alright then, so now the moment you've all been waiting for. We got all 3 of these bolts out, 1, 2, and then the one on the bottom underneath it. I had to get these hoses pushed out of the way and all that so I could get to this stuff. So now let's go ahead and work on this a little with our hand and see if this is going to just pop right off. Whoops, lost some coolant. Yep, there it is. Okay, well, it's another day, and we're going to try to wrap this up today with this thermostat replacement, and then I've got to move on to some other things here with this car. But anyway, what we need to do now is I'm going to take a towel, and I'm going to go in here and just clean that area up a little. It looks pretty clean as it is, but we'll just make sure our groove there for the gasket is nice and clean and all those types of things. So I've got a new thermostat assembly for this. This actually came with the car. This is what it looks like. And like I said, these are not intended to replace the thermostat by themselves. And this has a gasket made with it. You can see it right in there. Just goes around a little groove. So you don't have to do anything with that gasket other than make sure it's in there and it's seated, because you don't put sealer on it or any type of things like that with those. The trend has been in the last 10 years or so to get away from these gaskets that you have to seal up with sealer. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and clean it up, and you can just put the user bolts that I took out for that yesterday and put that thing back in and just snug it down appropriately. You don't have to, you don't have to sock it to it, but just make sure it's nice and snug and tight, and then you can put your hoses back on, and then we'll move on from that. Okay, we got that thermostat housing put back in and taken care of, snugged down, went around the bolts a few times, make sure they're all good and tight. So here's what I'll use to deal with that. Is I've got a small 1/4-inch ratchet and a small extension, a short extension, and this is an 8mm. This is an 8mm socket. You don't have to use a deep well if you don't have one or don't want one. Don't want to use one, just use whatever you got, but whatever will reach. This is one of these sort of wobbly extensions, and I'm not too crazy about those because to me they kind of force you to have a little bit loss of control there over it, but it worked good. So now let's go ahead and get these hoses put back on, and make sure when you put the hoses back on that you get those clamps back up where they were in their correct position. If you hear some kind of loud screeching noise in the background, which had just happened before I turned the camera on, it's one of my neighbor's dogs is having ongoing psychological trauma of some sort, and that's what that noise is. Well, anyway, back to this. We've got the hoses put back on, and I fought those clamps back in. Those clamps work well normally, spring clamps, but they're a pain to deal with because you have to squeeze them and slide them and try to position them back into where they were. That's what I always try to do. So it's a fight. And so I did that. I also reconnected that plug right there that I had taken out of the way so I could get my hand in there. So one thing to note on that clamp right there, if you look at that one, once the camera can zoom maybe a little bit, you see right there in the center between those two tangs on it, there's a little raised up little center tang right there. Sorry for my shaking hand there. That thing, what it is when these cars are assembled, these clamps are intended to be put on quickly, and so that thing, when you squeeze these ends together, that catches one of the ends and it keeps the clamp in an expanded position until it's ready to be released and locked down by its own spring pressure. So the thing is, that happens sometimes. It did on this one, so don't be fooled. Just looking at something there, looked a little unusual. It's alright, but don't be fooled by that. When you put that clamp back on, make sure it's not caught under there, because if it is, it's going to be expanded and it will not clamp, and it may blow off down the road somewhere, and you do not want that to happen because that's a big tow bill and a lot of problems, and it'll ruin your vacation. So just make sure when you look at it again that it is not caught under that little button in the middle. Make sure that clamp is expanded fully, or contracted fully rather, into its clamp position. And I'll show you what I used my arsenal of tools to deal with that stuff. I've used these two sizes of channel locks. I used these to pull a hose off with. You can get these at Harbor Freight. I use this for the clamp, use this for the clamp, use this for the hose, use this for the hose. I think I even ended up having that for the hose, and then I had to get under it with a pick to release the suction on the hose. So you can get most all this stuff at Harbor Freight pretty cheap. So that's what it took to get those hoses on and off. It's a fight. So anyway, at this point, what you will want to do is you will want to go under and double check that your radiator drain is tight where are we looking at? There it is, right there. Make sure that thing is tight and not gonna leak. Remember that is plastic going into plastic. It does not have to be gorillaed. Just tighten it carefully. And then you're gonna come back up and you'll be ready to probably, if you took this overflow bottle out of the way like I did, you can put it back into position and then put your hose back on, which I had laid over here someplace. It's kind of, there it is, kind of put itself back into position, I guess. But anyway, you put that back on, put the clamp back on, and then you should be ready to fill this thing up with coolant and observe for any leaks. And the reason why you want to do that before you put the power steering pump back in is because you want to be able to look at that. You can't run it yet, but at least you can look and see that you don't have coolant pouring out. And if everything looks good, then you're just going to simply put your power steering pump back into position, put the bolts back in, torque them down snugly, and then you can put your belt back on. Now I'm going to clip on a clip of putting the belt back on after I've done some other work to this thing. I've got to put a couple of pulleys on it that are making noise. One of them is, at least. So I'm going to do that part of this video now, but you will be about to see me putting the belt back on. So stay tuned. Okay, then I did want to go ahead and clip on this part right here to show you if you need to fill up the coolant with this. This car did have coolant in it. It's got this, what they call Motorcraft Gold, but you can get the same thing at the parts store. I got this at O'Reilly. It's GO5. It's 50 purified, pre-diluted, which is a rip-off, but it's the only way you can get it unless you go to the dealer, and it's going to be more at the dealer. So anyway, you can use this. If it's 50-50, just pour it right in and top it off. But don't mix your coolants. The stuff that's in this, it's called, like I said, it's called gold coolant. And you look at it, and it looks kind of green in there, but I'm going to get my measuring device out here and just show you that it's not green. When you look at it, it's quite clear, and it is gold. So put gold, if it's got gold in it, put gold back in it. If it's got orange or red, put red back in it. If it's got green, put green back in it. Don't mix them up. Now the trend is being away from, it says on here, it says where's it got this on here somewhere? It says phosphate free. They call those different words, like some HOAT and stuff like that, but the trend has been to get away from having phosphates in coolant. Makes it a little bit safer and supposedly easier on the cooling system, so that's why that is. But I'm going to go ahead and do another job on this, so we'll come back to the coolant procedure just in a jiff. Okay then, everything's back together. Got the power steering pump back in place and all my other things that I took loose, like that filler for that washer reservoir and the coolant recovery tank, and I've already filled it back up. It didn't actually take all the coolant yet, so we're gonna have to run it and let it bleed and get all of it circulated and make sure thermostat's gonna work and all that, but there's no leaks, so I made sure of that. So the last thing we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to put this belt back on. I'm putting a new belt in, but either way, if you want to reuse your old one, here's the diagram. This is the most simple way to show you. Hopefully this is going to pick up okay, but anyway, you're looking at the passenger side of the engine. This is the end of the belts on it, and you're going to go around the crankshaft, all the way around the crankshaft. You're going to come over, go around the air conditioner, come up to the power steering. You're going to go around the power steering, come back and go under the idler. You can go over the alternator, and you're going to go around the bottom of the tensioner, and then you're going to go around the water pump on the outside of the water pump. So if it's easier for you, you may want to say just start at the water pump and go around. So anyway, that's how you do it. Let's do that now. Okay, finally I had to fight a war to get this belt back on here, because it's a new belt and they never want to cooperate with you, do they? So it was a little tight, so I ended up having to get it on the tensioner down there first, and then weasel it over the water pump right there, right down in there last. So It finally went on. It was not easy. So anyway, I got the coolant filled, and I'm going to start this up and let it run and make sure everything's working. Okay, one tip before you start running this is you've got a coolant bleeder valve on these cars. It is right back here. So you simply have a flat blade tip on there, and you can rotate counterclockwise to open it, and we'll see if we get any air out, and we'll use that as we're running it to help bleed the air out of it. You may have to do that a few times. That's what you want it to do. Let it do that for a while, and you may need to see if you need to add some more coolant before you start the engine that the first time. But just let it go ahead and just out it's there. Boy, it like that with a coolant bleeder. Man, this thing went right down. I even started the engine. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. So I'm going to fill it back up again, and when you see just pure coolant coming out of that thing over there, then you can close it back up. You may want to like run it a little bit and just crack that thing a few times and let it burp a little bit. So it's kind of hard to explain how this thing operates, but that's generally it. You just don't want to have air pockets left in it. Watch your temperature gauge. Do not let it overheat. Well, I'll just tell you what, if there's a job I don't like doing more than transmissions, removing them, it's got to be changing thermostats or flushing cooling systems. Because these things, I tell you what, you have to wait and wait and wait to see if they're going to start burping and flowing coolant and not overheat. You're like, I don't know, might work. I don't know, let's run a while longer. You don't really know, do you? I could screw up and overheat. Well, maybe not. Maybe I'll work. Just stand there and watch.